The first duty of government is to protect our rights.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government in what we were tasked to do.
In the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, we have a right to life, we have a right to defend life.
This legislation is centered on meeting the needs of Idaho families.
And we have no way to maintain control over the spending of this program, and it will be a disaster for this state long term.
But we have a whole gamut of kids whose parents would like to do something for them and they cannot.
The courts have long held that our ability to transfer title on real property benefits society as a whole.
This is simply about putting it out of reach of young, innocent, vulnerable children and making our libraries and schools a safe place for them to go.
And I am increasingly frustrated that we cannot stop ourselves from drinking at the public trough.
He's sounding the alarm. He's saying if we don't address these issues, we potentially might have greater problems moving forward.
I feel like we're back to an unappointed board that gets to decide who is essential and who is non-essential.
If I was looking at a business and I was looking at these figures, there would be heads rolling because this is unsustainable.
We're supposed to be bottom-up government. We're supposed to be representing my citizens' ideas and your citizens' ideas, and we're supposed to be discussing them and debating them to come to a conclusion.
And for me, it's about a couple things. It's about food security, it's about national security, and it's about preserving American exceptionalism.
The First Amendment and our freedom of religion, freedom of speech are our first liberties. They are so important. We don't have the rest without them.
April 2nd, 2024. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Idaho Signal. We are on the air. The signal callers, you've got some work to do this week, folks. You've got some work to do this week. They're trying to get out of here this week. This should be interesting as they shuffle these bills through the House and Senate. Right now on the House floor, looks like we've got Representative Greg Lanting up on this Senate Bill 1323. This is where did I had that right in front of me. Senate Bill 1323. This is a Resource and Environment Committee bill about public utilities and revising terminology and certain terms and whatnot. So we'll keep an eye on that. We do know that the House has a few bills before it today that we're paying attention to. One of them, which is one we wanted to share with you yesterday, when it happened in committee, is Senate Joint Memorial 104. Now, these memorials, as we had mentioned before, these memorials are meant to send a message to our congressional delegation that we here in Idaho support this particular issue. And so apparently there's a bill in Congress right now called the Hearing Protection Act, which would reclassify suppressors as regular firearms. So currently they're classified under the same rules as, say, a machine gun would be. And so there's a lot of taxes involved, a lot of waiting periods, a lot of hoops that you have to go through if you were wanting to obtain a suppressor in Idaho. And so this went through the Senate. It was passed in the Senate, and it went through committee this week, or last week rather, and we wanted to share a couple clips from that because it is of interest. So let's listen to Representative Judy Boyle out of District 9 present this memorial to the committee.
During this Joint Memorial 104, and all this does is send a message to Congress that we would like them to take up the Hearing Protection Act that they have back there. So suppressors, they're not like the movies. It's not totally silent when you have a suppressor. It still makes noise. It definitely protects your hearing so that you aren't half deaf like most of us who have shot all our lives. This went into effect, unfortunately, in 1934 because the Fish and Game departments thought it would help with poaching, so they could hear a gunshot out there. And these things are regulated like an automatic weapon, like a machine gun right now. It's a $200 tax, takes about 270 days wait to receive one. So what this act in Congress would do is just regulate them like a regular firearm. So you just go buy one, wait for the next check, and then you could have it. So I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative Boyle. Are there questions for Representative Boyle?
Okay, so Representative Bruce Skog had a couple comments here, so let's listen to that, and then we'll wrap this bill up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A motion that SJM 104 go to the floor with a due pass recommendation with some comment. I have a suppressor. It was a real pain to get, and I have to carry a license with me in my glove box or on my person, or I end up in some federal prison if I don't have it with me and I get pulled over with the suppressor. So I strongly support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Skog. Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I do have a question.
For the bill sponsor?
Yes.
Okay. Representative Boyle, would you stand for a question?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Boyle, what is the difference between a suppressor and what we commonly call a silencer? Is that...
Representative Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I don't believe there's a difference.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Boyle. Is this memorial intended to apply to hunting rifles used in hunting, or does it also apply to handguns?
Representative Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It applies to any firearm.
Thank you.
A bonus. We got a bonus Gannon clip. I love it. We have something awesome for you to share with you. Not today, probably maybe the end of the week. I don't know. When do you think we drop that, you guys? Our producers, our trusty producers, have been collecting some great Gannon moments. So we might have to do that on our last day here. Anyway, that being said, so SJM 104, it passed committee. It's now on the floor of the House, and so it's working its way up. So hopefully we get to send that through. And I know many of you out there are paying attention to that, because that would save everybody a lot of money, a lot of headaches, and your hearing as well. So, okay. This morning, House Bill 722, which was an appropriations bill, made its way into the Senate. And there was much debate on this bill, because this is the funding bill for the Idaho Launch Program. And if you recall, last session, there was, the session, was it the session prior? I'm now getting all my dates confused, but there was a September in 2022, I believe, where the Idaho, no, it was last year. Am I crazy? Regardless of when it was, there was a special session where the, it must have been 22, where the Idaho legislature, the governor, got together and they put together this tax reduction bill, this tax rebate bill, and this funding bill for schools. Because at the time, Reclaim Idaho and the crazy leftists were trying to push through an initiative that would send, collect all of this tax dollars and send more and more money to education, without any accountability, mind you. And they would have this bill would have been a way, and it was a way, to curtail that initiative effort by saying, okay, we're just going to give money to the schools anyway by making tax breaks and doing all this stuff, and we're going to send money to and what they did is they appropriated over $400 million to go to education. $330 million of it would go directly to K through 12, and then there was this $80 million launch grant program that would be for workforce training. And so when the legislature came back last year, they had House Bill 24. It got a lot of attention. It got a lot of debate, a lot of pushback behind it, and it barely passed. And what this was, it set up this Idaho Launch Program, which everybody was selling as a tool to pay for training for in-demand careers in Idaho. And there was a lot of speculation about what are we actually paying for? Who's the money going towards? Where is it headed? Right? But it passed, and then this year was the year to say, okay, now we have to fund it, right? And so they've apparently have gotten a lot of people, a lot of high school graduates, seniors signing up for these grants, and now we start seeing the debate happen over the funding of this bill, and all of a sudden the argument has shifted from just paying for training for jobs to now paying for college for high school graduates. And that's not what this whole program was sold as a couple of years ago. And so we want to highlight for you the mentality of these folks, because they're buying it hook, line, and sinker. They have decided that this is the reason why we need to fund this, is because students aren't going to college or are not being able to go to college. Just in general. I mean, these are the words that they're saying. These are the arguments that they're using. Today, on the floor of the Senate, Senator David Lent presented the bill. It had one person debate in opposition, and then he came back to close, where he dropped or he opened up the kimono here. And so let's listen to his closing debate on House Bill 722, which funds this launch grant program.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator from 12. You know, it's interesting that we talk about the attrition rates in education. I'm sure the good senator from 12 is aware of the attrition rate from the current higher education system. Those numbers are significantly lower, and particularly, I believe the number I'm referencing is 72% on average don't finish from traditional higher education. Certainly, we know from our appropriation process that we're around $700 million a year that we're spending on higher ed. That's an issue. So let's talk about why what we're doing here makes a difference. Let's go back to 7th and 8th grade. We now have a law in Idaho that if you're in the 7th and 8th grade in Idaho in middle school, you're required now to take a course in career exploration. So by the time you start the 9th grade, your traditional high school years, you have already had some opportunity to think about what my interests might be. These states and countries around the world, that's how they do it. They help their students start thinking about it at an earlier age. So not like myself or as a school board member, when I would shake those hands of those graduating seniors as they'd walk across the stage, and I knew really well that they had no idea what tomorrow was going to be like. It's like, well, I'll worry about that tomorrow. I'm going to get a job this summer, and we'll see how it goes. These institutions that are successful, these states and these countries, they start at an earlier age. They start thinking about it. I had the opportunity to go to Finland and spend a week diving into their education system, and Estonia as well. What you find is this is how they do it. They don't wait till a kid graduates from high school and then say, well, I think I'll figure it out this summer. Because what happens is we lose them. And now we have, in this day and age, it was different in my day and age or my dad's day and age, but in this day and age, if you come out of high school with no marketable skills, it's a tough go. Try making a living. Try supporting a family with no marketable skills. Those days are gone. In my grandfather's day, a high school education was a big deal. In my day, we were told, go to college. Doesn't matter what you get a degree in, just go to college and get a degree. What we're finding today from our business and industry folks, our employers, is we need some kind of marketable skills built into our workforce. We have lots of people out there, but we have this issue that they refer to as skill mix. So when we talk about this particular program, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about providing those marketable skills to our young people. And why is that important? because now they can get jobs. They can pay taxes. They can support their families. They're not relying or living on the edge of the poverty level, dipping in and out of social programs. We've actually created an economy that works. We're providing a workforce that supports our business and industry in this state. That's what they want. That's what our business and industry wants. That's what our students want. That's what we're doing here. Incidentally, concerning launch, I don't know if you remember, but launch has a 5-year sunset. We're going to drive this thing down the street for 5 years and see how it works. When you institute a program,
okay,
this
we are
big,
going to we're going to break away here for a moment, because right now, live in the Senate, Senator Scott Herndon is debating the Medicaid budget. This thing is out of control, this budget, and we want to listen to Senator Lenny.
32%. So it literally went from $2.03 billion to what's going to now be a total of $4.71 billion if we approve this enhancement to the Medicaid budget. And one of the things that we've seen is just from fiscal year 20, we've seen a 66% growth, $2.83 billion. And that's a lot faster than the rate of inflation and population growth in the state. And so we have to look at what are we failing at? And what we're failing at is cost containment. It's basically emblematic of the situation we end up in when the government becomes the single largest payer of healthcare services. And for as many interim study committees as we've done, and we've done some just since we met last year, and we ask questions of how are we going to control the Medicaid budget and Medicaid expansion and pharmacy costs and everything that goes into it, for all of our study, we have not come up with a way to contain the cost of this budget. And I think it's because we're the single biggest payer in healthcare, and there's a lack of competition. So if we're going to reduce Medicaid and its cost to the state of Idaho, we're going to have to make fewer people on the program, fewer services, providers paid less, and it all starts with us. We're the ones who can contain the growth of the budget. In here, we see an increase on provider payments. We see a huge cost for just to manage the system. But a few of the things, as I look at the data, we're now spending $12,000 per year on average per recipient. The pharmacy spend is up 18% from 2022 to 2023. That's the latest data I had access to. There are an average of 45,000 people in Idaho weekly consuming pharmaceuticals at a total cost of $13,700 per person per year, accounted for in this budget.
Folks, let's bring Senator Herndon down just a touch here. We just played Senator David Lent talking about free college, okay, giving money for free college so that people aren't dependent upon the government later on. And now we have Senator Scott Herndon here trying to explain to everybody that this Medicaid budget, which is the government-paid health care, right? Government-paid health care through Medicaid. And we've seen fights happening throughout the session here regarding who should be on Medicaid. We have young able-bodied people who are collecting Medicaid who should be out in the workforce. And so there's a lot of hypocrisy going on. And throughout David Lent's defense of this launch bill, talking about look at what Finland is doing and Estonia is doing. It's incredible. The amount of socialism, then the socialism ideas that have crept into Idaho through the Republican Party. It's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Let's go back into the Senate here. I believe Senator Carl Bierke is going to speak on this bill. Let's hear what he has to say for a moment.
And I started thinking about that, and I said to myself, it's like, where was this train wreck? A lot of us think It happened when Medicaid had its enhancement brought to Idaho. I think the train wreck happened through the Affordable Care Act. And a lot of us that watched medical insurance and the things that were going on in the nation realized that at some point we were going to start rationing care. And to a certain extent, we're at a point where we're rationing care for doctors in this state. So we do have some interesting dilemmas here. This is a very complex budget that has a lot of work that goes into it. I don't disagree with the senator from District 1. That's a perspective that a lot of people hold to. But I think when we're voting on this budget, we need to look at why we are or why we aren't, and where our perspective lies and why we decide to or not to vote for this. You know, I've had people tell me that, well, you know, maybe there's no one in my district on Medicaid. In reality, in Region 1, 1 in 5 folks are on Medicaid. So we have to look at, again, I think I've talked about this in the past, of what our perspective is for what we think we should or shouldn't do versus what we truly do in a representative government when we're taking care of our constituent base. On the flip side of that, I've had people come to me and say that, hey, this is terrible for the forgotten man. That person struggling, paying his taxes every day. And that's how we weigh this, right? I had an acquaintance the other day come up to me who used to be that forgotten man. And due to a series of events and misadventures, that forgotten man that was very upset about paying his taxes and the growing cost of Medicaid in this state suddenly finds himself on Medicaid. Again, it's a very complex issue in determining how we're going to handle this moving forward. Is it growing exponentially out of control? Do we have a federal government, as we've talked about here many times, a run rate of $1 trillion every 100 or so days? We're over $34 trillion in debt at this point. At some point, this is all going to come crumbling down, in my opinion. And we need to protect the folks here in Idaho to our very last breath. And again, is that looking at this budget as the best thing since sliced bread and moving forward and passing it? Or is it taking a stand and saying, hey, we want to hold the line in some regard? And we talk about the complexities of this budget. We talk about the FMAP, the federal matching assistance percentage, I believe it is. You know, we used to be at a 70-30 match with the federal government, which brings up another interesting concept. The better our state does, the lower percentage of money we get assisted by the federal government. I think we're at a 67-33 at this point, or something to that effect, from a 70-30. So there we have that issue again. It's like, well, how do we deal with that? You know, we want to do great as a state. We want our economy comparatively to be better than the other states in this nation. But then we get less money towards Medicaid. So what truly is the answer to this dilemma? There's only really one way to cut the cost of Medicaid. And it's alluded to by the senator from District 1, and that is to find a way to lessen the amount of people that are actually on Medicaid. And I don't know how we go about that. I talked about the Affordable Care Act, rationing of care. We are in a dilemma where that train wreck has happened already. And as the state of Idaho and the good folks in the legislature here are trying to do, is pick up the pieces after the fact. I kind of liken it to a multi-casualty incident of a train wreck. This is us picking up the pieces and attempting to do so every legislative year that this budget is due, seeing this budget grow with great people. I won't mention their names because I don't want them to get a bunch of fan mail they don't want. But we had an interim director that stepped in to take care of this. And I can't say more great things about that particular person. And an LSO analyst that stepped in to handle this budget for the first time and has done a fantastic job. I don't know whether or not us deciding not to vote for this is going to move the needle, but I think that when we look at this budget we need to look at it in its entirety, what the implications are for this state moving forward, and how we handle a kind of growing to be single payer medical system, which results in not a great deal. So when you look at this, I've got, like I said, 1 in 5 folks in Region 1 on Medicaid that I represent. So I've got the other 80%. At some point, I'll make a decision on how I vote on this budget. It'll likely have something to do with how I can best support my constituency or and the people I represent. But I ask that when you do vote on this, that you deliberate and you think about this long and hard. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Debate the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Groh.
Thank you, Mr. President. This Medicaid thing is one of the toughest things we've dealt with since Medicaid expansion, and even before, obviously. One of the challenges with this Medicaid issue is that this is under federal control. We have limited ability within the state to do certain things. Now, we've tried with the federal control to get the work requirements and other requests that we put forward. They've been sitting there for years, and we've not received a response. So we've tried to do what we could with the feds. So what that leaves is just what we can do with state control. So what can we do? Well, there's certain things, and I commend the work group. I commend the bill that you have before you, the folks that helped put that together, because they worked to try to be as tight as they could be on this budget, and yet make sure that we're meeting the federal requirements to take care of the people that we have to take care of. There are no options on who's taken care of at this point from the feds as to the folks that are currently on the system. So that's a factor of how many folks are there. We tried to take off of 100,000, which we did. Then the feds got involved again and made us put 18,000 back on the rolls. I'm going to repeat that. We took off 100,000, who we could not take off during the pandemic because of federal rules. Then the feds stopped that rule. We took off 100,000, but they didn't like it. And so they gave us a new interpretation and said, we got to put 18,000 back on the rolls. So we've had to do that. It's a very frustrating budget to work on. This is a frustrating bill. I think we all have some sense of concerns on this thing. However, I would draw your attention to the fact that we did all we could do from a state control with this particular budget, cut things, limit the number of new employees who were being added, and the total amount of this increase. I know there's been huge increases in the past. The total amount of this increase is less than 1% over the prior year. It's 0.6%. Now you can say, well, that's the federal, it's this, it's that. I don't care what you want to say. It's less than 1% increase over last year, 0.6%. I would encourage your aye vote. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Wintrow.
To debate the bill.
You have the floor, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to do a little information sharing.
All right. We are going to take a quick break here, but as you just heard, we have on the bottom here, we have 132% increase. I just wanted to clarify that that's over 10 years since Medicaid was expanded. I'm sorry, since the 10 years ago, the fiscal year 15, this is going into fiscal year 25. We've seen a 132% increase. So last year it's a small increase over last year's budget, but this is because we have seen and we heard some folks talk about how we've seen bills come in to try and reduce who is eligible for Medicaid, so that the Medicaid budget and the Medicaid services and functions and the dollars are spent on those who are in the most need. When it comes to helping to provide folks who are in desperate need of health care because of their income level, because of their situations, the government is trying to help in those situations, and having people on the rolls that don't need to be is something that this legislature is trying to push through. We saw Representative Jordan Redmond with a massive Medicaid bill that would have reformed Medicaid and who is eligible for Medicaid, and that didn't even get a print hearing. It was shot down during the print hearing. I mean, it got a print hearing. It didn't have an actual hearing. It never got printed, the bill, and so, which was shocking. You would think that. When folks stand up to say, hey, we got to do something about this, it's a problem, that they would want to do something. So we'll keep tabs on this as it moves along. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back and try and carry on with the rest of the business. Okay, folks, stick around.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government and what we were tasked to do.
The dictionary defines a pledge as something that you give as a sign that you'll keep a promise. As Idahoans, that's what we're looking for in our elected leaders, a sign that they'll keep their word. Talk is cheap, and so are political promises, hidden agendas, and special interests. This is why we created the Citizens Alliance of Idaho Pledge, affirming the values Idahoans have been living by for over 100 years. Inspired by the only two documents everyone has agreed to live by. So when an Idaho legislator signs our pledge, inviting voters to publicly hold them accountable, that's what we call political integrity. The pledge restores trust and honesty between voters and their legislators. It means protecting our shared values and ensuring your voice is heard in Boise. And that is priceless. Thank your legislator for having the political courage to sign the Citizens Alliance of Idaho Pledge. And if they haven't, it's time to ask why.
Senator Hart.
To debate the bill.
Senator Hart, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was working on another piece of legislation this session, and I reached out to the legislative library and I asked them if they could find a mission statement for the Department of Health and Welfare. And they looked at the history of the Department of Welfare and discovered that I think it was in the 1970s that 4 agencies were brought together and given the name Health and Welfare. But there is no mission statement for the Department of Health and Welfare. And as a policy setting branch of government, I think if we want to get control over this budget, that would be a really great place to start, to decide and define what the mission of this agency is. So I'll be a no vote, and I think the next time we have an interim committee to work on the Health and Welfare Department, we ought to define what its limits are, what its jurisdiction is, and what it should be doing. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. President, to debate the bill.
You have the floor, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, so Medicaid was intended to be a safety net for the truly needy, but what we've seen over time is where it's being utilized for those that are able-bodied individuals to be able to work. Unfortunately, our federal government has handcuffed the states, and when we brought in Medicaid expansion, we were promised that this would cut costs and save Idaho money, and that just has not been the case whatsoever. Total Medicaid enrollment now sits at an all-time high, surpassing nationwide 100 million enrollees, and that has been a spike by nearly 13 million with expanded Medicaid. We are kicking this can down the road, and the truly needy, I think, are the ones that are suffering the consequences of this. There are different things that we could be doing with this budget that I don't think that we are doing. And in our interim committees, there was the ability to be able to look at optional services that are still within this budget, that nothing happened with those. So what are we going to do as we have an unsustainable program that's continuing to cost us more and more money each and every year? Well, we can't continue to fund it. And when that happens, then what are we going to do? So I think we need to go ahead and nip this in the bud now and be able to start reducing these budgets and actually looking at how we can sustain things. And then we need to go ahead and do those things that we have tried to do, as it was talked about, with putting some bookends, not creating an environment for Idahoans to become dependent on welfare, because that's what we're ending up with the continued growth in those that are on the program. So I am going to encourage a no vote on this.
Is there further debate? Hearing none.
Mr. President.
Senator Cook.
To debate.
Have the floor to debate.
Thank you. Senators, this is a good time. You've heard a lot of things about we haven't done anything.
Okay, some good comments there from Senator Hart, Senator Nichols. We'll continue to watch this vote and see how it goes. Over in the House, they are debating another bill, so we'll pay attention to what's going on over there. But we don't have to go over there right now. What we do wanted to do, we had Maria Nate scheduled to come on, but she is watching the Senate debate on the Medicaid right now, so she's not going to be able to join us unless they end quickly and she can come on before the end of the program. But so we'll pay attention to that. But we did want to present some good news. Because as we, suffer these battles here and we have to go through and figure out, what's going on with all all of our taxpayer money and stuff, there are some good bills that went through. Throughout the program, you've seen down below, scrolling, these are all bills that have been signed by the governor. So these are some good wins. These are some interesting bills, some ones that, you may have pushback on. I don't blame you. But I do want to go through some of the highlights that have been going on throughout the session with these good bills. And so, I've got a list here. I just kind of want to go through them and let you know where these bills are that we've highlighted. There's about a dozen or two of these, and the interesting thing about a bill, that that gets signed by the governor, is that not every bill that gets signed by the governor is one that the governor may support wholeheartedly. It may be one that he had no idea was coming down, or it may be one that he wrote with his team and wanted to get sent through the legislature. So a lot of times you will see articles get posted. Do we have that article? From it was published in the Epoch Times just a couple of days ago, and it was about the signing of the no public funds for sex change operations, and this was a bill that came about. Yeah, here it is. And so anytime, Idaho bans Medicaid for transgender procedures for sex change operations. And of course, you've got Governor Little there signing as the head of the state here, signing the bill. And under his watch a few years ago, there was a male prisoner who was claimed to be a woman and demanded that the state pay for his sex change operation, and therefore allowing that person to then be part of the women's population in prison. And the case went up to the Idaho Supreme Court. At the very least, it might have gone to the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't think it went to the U.S. Supreme Court. I think it stayed within the Idaho Supreme Court. And Idaho was on the hook. They were on the hook for this transgender surgery, the sex change operation of a prisoner. It was down in a prison down in Pocatello. So, and at the time, they tried to fight this and saying, we shouldn't have public funds going towards these sex change operations. So lo and behold, a few years later, we have this bill that came through that we paid attention to greatly on this program. And so I just kind of wanted to highlight there that oftentimes, when and you see this in Florida, Governor DeSantis signs all these bills, but a lot of the times, a lot of the hard work of these bills are done in the legislature. And so we wanted to highlight what has come through. I'm going to whip through some of these quickly. Like I said, you've been seeing them down at the bottom. But these are the bills that were signed by the governor so far. House Bill 4, and there's a lot of them, but we selected a few. All right, is that enough qualifiers here? Sorry. All right, House Bill 444. This amends existing law to revise a provision regarding a sale exchange or donation of a county property. Apparently, there was when the county would, if you owed a debt and the state took your property, they would sell it, collect whatever they were owed, and then they would give you the rest of the balance. There was a provision that said, but if they transfer it to another government agency, that you were out of luck for any of the leftover funds or anything like that. So they amended the law to fix that. House Bill 414 revises provisions regarding commercial driver's license permits. So now you're able to, when you renew your commercial driver's license, you can renew it instead of for 4 years to 8 years. It also reduces the amount of money that you have to pay. So it reduces the fee, $5 less if you do all this stuff online. So that's always good to hear whenever they're reducing fees and making it easier and longer for you to have their government paperwork. House Bill 532, it amends existing law to remove a requirement that an individual must not have possessed a driver's license for the last 6 months. I'm reading their slug lines on here, and sometimes you can't even understand what they mean. But basically, 532 will allow you to get a no fee identification card for the purposes of voting. When they removed the ability for students to show school ID in terms of voting, it apparently left folks without any sort of identification to allow them to vote when voting came. So this provision here, this new law here, would allow somebody who came here, they don't have a driver's license, to go obtain a free identification card in order to vote. And there's different rules and such in there. Senate Bill 1216 was fascinating because apparently we covered this before. Apparently there are things that happen where people would be in possession of a driver's license that where they had violated some sort of term or some sort of policy, or they weren't eligible for a driver's license, but they obtained one anyway. That it was kind of like at the department's discretion whether or not they revoked that driver's license. So this codifies into law that should there be any violation of these things about having a driver's license, that your license is actually revoked. It's not to the discretion of the department whether or not your license is revoked. Senate Bill 1234, this tells all health benefit plans that you must cover birth control from to up to 6 months. 6 months of birth control must be covered instead of 3 months. It's now extended to 6 months. What else was? I don't know if I want to go through all of these here. Senate bill, there was a bunch of bills that we had some footage of here. The more important ones, I think, was House Bill 498, and this was the Online Protection Act. We covered that extensively here. This would essentially force adult content providers who provide adult content online to verify the age of the user. And it's not just a simple, yes, I'm 18, I click and then go through. It's no. You have to actually verify the person's age. You have to check their ID, so to speak. And you can't keep that information and sell it as data, when you give off your information. So that law passed, and that was House Bill 498. So that was a big win. It was House Bill 668. That was the no public funds for the gender transition. And House Bill 620, which we watched, which tells local divisions of government, the cities, the counties, and so forth, that they cannot put extra restrictions on or ordinances or anything like that, or extra taxes on regarding knives. So that's a good Second Amendment win. Yeah, there's Representative Redmond presenting that during committee, and it did get amended slightly as it went through the Senate, but it did pass, and the governor signed it. Senate Bill 1317 is the Don't Tread on Me license plate bill. And what's really cool about this is that the funds generated, because when you order a specialty license plate, you pay a little extra money. And if there's also, Idaho has 25 different license plates designs, and each one of them generally, the money goes toward a fund of some sort of charity or some sort of fund. And the Don't Tread on Me license plate will generate funds for an existing gun safety education program for kids. So that's great. So, and that goes into effect. So I think those plates will be available next year. So get in line for your Don't Tread on Me license plate. We also have some important parental rights bills. Senate Bill 1232 provided for additional parental rights during child protection service investigations. We've seen a lot of things in the news in this state alone, but across the nation, where Child Protective Services gets involved, and the parental rights are completely thrown out the window. And so this bill was an important bill, and it made its way through. It got signed by the governor, and that's fantastic. Senate Bill 1275 provides immunity for employers who do allow their employees to carry firearms on the at work, basically. So that's good, because if there are employers who were on the fence whether or not they should allow their employees to carry firearms, this now provides immunity for them to say, yep, we don't want to take part in infringing on anybody's right. If they want to wear their firearm, they can. And all of the responsibility is on the firearm owner and wearer, carrier. So that's good. Senator Chris Trakel presented that bill in the Senate, and it made its way through, and the governor signed it. So those are some good wins there. Another one of particular note was House Bill 617. This repeals the needle exchange program. I think it was 2019. Representative Megan Blanksma was put forth this needle exchange program, which if you paid attention across blue cities and blue states across the country, where they say, oh, we need to have a needle exchange program in order to reduce the amount of disease that's being spread through dirty needle exchanges and all sorts of stuff. And sure, I get it. That's the problem. But anytime the state feels like they need to step in and make it easier for drug users to do drugs, it's fascinating, the mindset that goes into that. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and this was a bill that paved our way to hell, as it was made light of earlier this year in somewhere in the Treasure Valley, where a needle exchange clinic was caught giving out much more than just clean needles, other drug paraphernalia, drugs themselves, I think was part of the report and the investigation that's going on. So House Bill 617, you see it here, thanks to the Gem State Chronicle for giving us some good visual representations of a bill's progress. But House Bill 617 here made its way through, and it's been signed by the governor, and we will no longer have, at this particular moment, needle exchange programs where that get taken advantage of, because that's exactly what happened here. It was taken advantage of. House Bill 610 I thought was interesting for all the folks who are stuck behind school buses and think that the best way, if you're in a rush to go around a school bus as our children are jumping aboard a school bus, the fines have increased for your first violation of overtaking a school bus when it has got its little stop sign out and is trying to board children. I think you can wait just a few extra seconds and not hurry around a school bus. So, and then lastly, there was I'm trying to remember the number here. but it was, speaking of kids, House Bill 494. This was a major overhaul of the code and the statute regarding crimes of trafficking and sexual activity and commercial sexual activity, or prostitution rather, and human trafficking and sex trafficking and child trafficking and all sorts of basically an overhaul of that statute that dealt with this and dealt with the punishments for this. And so it looks to be an enhancement and of those crimes. So if you're interested in looking at the update on that, that's House Bill 494. Okay, folks, we're going to take another short break. We will be back. I want to dip in. The House has adjourned for the day. And we will get an update on where everything stands today and what's going to happen the rest of the week. Who knows? We're kind of just waiting on them to end this session. We'll be right back.
We need to start making Idaho first, meeting the needs of Idaho families.
There's a saying in Idaho, Esto Perpetua. It is forever. But the truth is, nothing lasts forever. Not without a fight. The Gem State is ours to fight for. It is ours to win. For life and liberty. For honesty and integrity. We ride together.
Okay, let's go over to the Senate. This is a bill we paid attention to earlier this week yesterday rather. This is the organ harvesting bill that we covered yesterday. Let's listen.
The second thing it does is it would remove genetic sequencing devices that are associated with adversary militaries from state supply chains. So it needs to be acknowledged that the Chinese people are the first and the greatest victims of the Communist Party, which controls China, obviously. They are victims of forced organ transplants, which cost political descendants their lives. And it's not just the Chinese people, but other political descendant groups are also affected by this. The second thing we need to realize is that the Chinese people are victims of having their DNA harvested, sequenced, and perhaps stored for future use against them. So what this bill does is it removes any American involvement in these heinous practices. And with that, debate is open.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, Senator Lenny, you're recognized to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, it is a complex bill, but it really just, what it accomplishes is it disentangles our medical system from these practices going on in China and other adversary countries. With that, debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Bill 670 as amended in the Senate pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams, Anthony, Berndt, Bierke, Burtonshaw, Carlson, Cook, Den Hartog, Foreman, Grow, Guthrie, Harris, Hart, Hartgen, Herndon, Just, Lakey, Lee, Lenny, Lent, Nichols, Okonowitz, Robbie, Ricks, Schroeder, Semoroff, Shea, Taylor, Taves, Trakel, Van Orden, Ward Engelking, Winder, Wintrow, Seiderveld, Adams, Berndt, Schroeder,
The vote count shows 34 in favor with 1 absent. A majority having voted in the affirmative. House Bill 670 as amended in the Senate has passed the Senate. Hearing no correction to the title is approved, and the bill will be returned to the House.
Mr. President,
Senator
I
Anthony.
ask unanimous consent the Senate return to the fifth order of business.
Without objection, the Senate will return to the fifth order of business. Presentation of petitions, resolutions, and memorials. The Senate's at the fifth order.
Mr. President,
Senator Anthony.
I ask unanimous consent the Senate now advance to the sixth order of business.
Without objection, the Senate will advance to the sixth order of business. Reports of standing committees. The Senate's at the sixth order of business.
Mr. President,
Senator Anthony.
I ask the Senate go at ease prior to recess for introductions and announcements.
Senate go at ease.
Mr. President.
Senator Guthrie.
Okay, so they're going to go through a few announcements there. But good news, House Bill 670, as amended in the Senate, has passed unanimously. There was, I think it was 34-0 with one absent. Very good. Good news. All right, so that bill will head back to the House so that they can look over the amendment and vote on it. It passed over there overwhelmingly as well. So good news there. Okay, we're coming up on the end of the show. We're not going to have our guest with us today. So we will check back with her tomorrow. But we do have a bit of a surprise. As some of you know, in a past life, I was a filmmaker, producer, director, and so forth. But thankfully, I still get to engage in that. And I got involved in a project with Seamus Coughlin of Freedom Tunes, and we developed this new series called The Extremist Files. And AMP America, if you've not heard of AMP America, ampamerica.com is a media site. Articles, it's starting to now produce original content. You can find podcasts and other programs on there. But The Extremist Files debuted its first episode last month. And today, the second episode was released exclusively on X at AMP America on X. And so we have the entire second episode to share with you today. So we are going to leave you with the second episode of The Extremist Files. We encourage you to follow AMP America on X. And I'm super proud of this fun cartoon that we got to do with Seamus. So check it out, and we will see you tomorrow.
For a real show, Jane. You thought those other extremists were bad? Wait till you hear about all the horrible things that have been happening in our public schools.
Like that incident in Loudoun County.
A true tragedy. But don't worry, we'll never let a father speak to a school board like that again. That's right, Jane. We're in a school board meeting. You've never seen animals like this before, I guarantee it.
How are ya? Oh, not so bad. How are you? Not so good. Oh, sorry to hear that. They're trying to teach our kids a bunch of stuff they were never asked to. And they're not teaching them nothing else. Oh, well, that is not so good. You said it.
Shh! The elders are speaking!
Which is why we believe it's fair to say Americans have gotten good enough at math and we can focus on teaching our kids social justice instead. Any questions?
Here's a question. Did you ever think of asking the parents what we want?
We don't negotiate with terrorists.
Are you insane?
That could have gotten ugly.
Where on earth do you parents get off telling us what we can teach your kids?
Where did you get off telling my son he should be shamed because of his skin color?
Ugh, that's inexcusable. Minorities go through enough.
He's adopted. He's white.
Oh, well, to re-answer your first question, because your son should be shamed due to his skin color. Next.
I'm adopted?
Huh. Maybe our school board isn't producing the brightest minds.
It never did. The scores have been slipping for decades. And then you went from not teaching our kids to making them more confused than when they went in.
I'm a girl, Mommy.
You see?
Well, I'm sorry that you're concerned about grooming and educational standards. But some of us are trying to ensure that the students who identify as transgender furries have gender-neutral fire hydrants to pee on. Why on earth was this being taught to my child?
Oh, that's disgusting.
How could this happen?
We're going to need to involve law enforcement.
Oh, thank goodness.
I told you you've never seen extremism like this before.
I think you might be right.
Bill, I think it puts a stake in the ground that says we have a sovereign right to protect what's ours.